The palace thought the drama was over. Meghan thought she still had one final card left to play. But what happened behind those ancient royal walls allegedly changed everything. Because instead of reopening the door, King Charles reportedly slammed it shut and then did something nobody saw coming. He allegedly turned around and backed Prince William completely, sending a message so powerful that even longtime palace insiders were left whispering the same question. Was this the moment William truly became the center of royal power while Meghan's final attempt collapsed in spectacular fashion? For weeks, strange rumors had been drifting through royal circles. Quiet conversations, closed-door meetings, unexplained tensions. The kind of palace silence that often signals something much bigger is happening behind the scenes. While the public saw official engagements and carefully managed appearances, insiders allegedly sensed a different story unfolding underneath the polished royal image. At the center of it all was Meghan. According to growing speculation, Meghan's team allegedly believed there was still room for a breakthrough. Not a complete reconciliation, not a dramatic return, but perhaps some kind of arrangement that could reopen communication channels and create a path forward after years of public tension. It was reportedly presented as a last attempt, a final proposal, one last opportunity before positions became impossible to change. What made the situation explosive was the timing. Charles was already facing enormous pressure. Questions about the monarchy's future continued to dominate discussions. Public attention remained fixed on every royal move, and behind the scenes, advisors were reportedly becoming increasingly concerned about stability, succession, and the institution's long-term reputation. This was supposed to be a delicate moment. Instead, it became a battlefield, because according to palace whispers, something unexpected allegedly landed on Charles's desk just as Meghan's proposal arrived. Information, documents, assessments, details from previous disputes. Nobody seems entirely certain what it was. The theories vary wildly, but nearly every version of the story contains one common detail. After reviewing the material, Charles reportedly changed, not gradually, not cautiously. Suddenly, people who expected lengthy negotiations allegedly found themselves staring at a king whose mind was already made up. And that's where the real mystery begins. What exactly convinced Charles that compromise was no longer the answer? Why did palace conversations reportedly shift so dramatically almost overnight? And why did William's name suddenly begin appearing in every important discussion? According to insiders, this wasn't just about Meghan anymore. The issue allegedly grew larger than family disagreements, larger than personal relationships, larger than reconciliation itself. The focus shifted toward the future. And in the future, one figure stood at the center of everything: Prince William. Royal observers began noticing a fascinating pattern. Whenever discussions turned towards stability, continuity, or protecting the institution, William's position became stronger. Advisors reportedly viewed decisions not only through Charles's reign, but through the reign that would eventually follow. That changed the calculation completely, because any arrangement accepted today might create expectations tomorrow. Any exception made now might become a precedent later. And suddenly, Meghan's proposal allegedly became connected to much bigger questions than anyone initially imagined. Questions about trust, questions about loyalty, questions about the future shape of the monarchy itself. The deeper advisors looked, the more complicated everything reportedly became. Then came the moment that allegedly shocked palace insiders. Charles reportedly stopped asking what would solve today's problem. Instead, he began asking what would protect tomorrow's monarchy. That distinction changed everything, because once the discussion became about the institution rather than the individuals involved, William's influence reportedly grew dramatically. Observers claim senior figures increasingly aligned behind a common objective: protecting the future crown. And William represented that future. The alleged proposal that once appeared capable of reopening doors was now being examined through a completely different lens. Suddenly, every possible compromise carried risks. Every potential concession raised new questions. Every discussion seemed to circle back to the same conclusion: what helps William ultimately helps the monarchy. And if something threatens that future, it becomes much harder to justify. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading throughout royal circles. Some claimed Meghan expected resistance but never anticipated complete rejection. Others insisted the proposal was always destined to fail because trust issues had become too deeply embedded. Whatever the truth may be, one thing reportedly became impossible to ignore: the atmosphere inside palace walls had changed, not slightly. Dramatically, the optimism some observers had sensed earlier was disappearing. In its place emerged something much colder, something more final. signal, something that suggested Charles was preparing to make a decision that would echo far beyond the immediate controversy. Then, whispers began circulating that William himself had received detailed briefings regarding the situation. That detail electrified royal watchers, because, if true, it suggested this was no longer merely Charles managing a family dispute. It suggested preparation for the future, preparation for the next era, preparation for decisions whose consequences could stretch years ahead. And that realization reportedly sent shockwaves through palace circles, because suddenly the story wasn't about Meghan trying to reopen a door, not because Charles rushed the decision, but because by the time the proposal reached its final stage, many of the people surrounding him reportedly believed the outcome had already become unavoidable. The deeper palace figures examined the situation, the more they found themselves asking uncomfortable questions about what the monarchy was becoming and what it needed to survive the next decade. Suddenly, the discussion was no longer focused on repairing old wounds. It was focused on protecting future stability. And that is where everything allegedly tilted in William's favor. According to persistent palace whispers, Charles eventually reached a point where every possible path seemed to lead back to the same conclusion. The institution could not continue operating in a state of uncertainty. Questions surrounding trust, expectations, and future responsibilities had reportedly become too large to ignore. The proposal that once seemed like a potential bridge now allegedly looked like a risk. And in moments when monarchs feel pressure, history suggests they often choose continuity over experimentation. Then came the decision that sent shockwaves through royal circles. The proposal failed. No revised arrangement, no surprise compromise, no dramatic royal reunion. Instead, according to growing speculation, Charles delivered a firm answer and immediately shifted attention towards strengthening the future structure of the monarchy. That is the moment insiders claim truly stunned palace observers. Because rather than attempting to balance every competing interest, Charles allegedly made his priorities unmistakably clear. He backed William completely. The symbolism of that move was impossible to ignore. Royal watchers began interpreting every appearance, every meeting, every public gesture through a new lens. Suddenly, William appeared less like the future king and more like the man already helping shape the institution's direction. Discussions that once centered around Charles increasingly shifted toward William's role in the years ahead, and that created an entirely new wave of speculation. Was Charles simply preparing the monarchy for the future? Or had Meghan's failed proposal accelerated a transition that was already quietly underway? The questions multiplied. Meanwhile, reports suggested that Meghan's camp was left facing a much more difficult reality than expected. Whatever hopes existed before the rejection allegedly became harder to maintain afterward. Conversations that once focused on possibilities reportedly shifted toward limitations. Every future move risked being judged through the shadow of the failed proposal. Every public appearance risked being interpreted as a reaction to the king's decision. And inside palace walls, another figure reportedly gained influence as the drama unfolded: Princess Anne. Observers increasingly described Anne as the quiet force standing behind the monarchy's most disciplined decisions. While others attracted headlines, Anne allegedly focused on one question alone: what protects the institution? According to royal commentators, that mindset aligned closely with growing concerns among senior advisors. As emotions intensified, Anne's reputation for duty and consistency reportedly made her voice even more influential. Together, Charles, William, and Anne allegedly formed a powerful center of gravity inside the royal structure, not through dramatic declarations, not through public confrontations, but through a shared focus on continuity. That perception only intensified public fascination. Because while Meghan's proposal may have failed, the consequences seemed far larger than a single rejection. The balance of influence appeared to be shifting. The future appeared to be taking shape. And some observers began wondering whether this controversy would eventually be remembered not as the story of a failed proposal, but as the moment William's authority truly accelerated. Yet even after the decision, uncertainty refused to disappear. If anything, it grew stronger. Questions continued swirling throughout royal circles. Could relationships ever recover? Was the divide now permanent? Had this become the point of no return? Nobody seemed capable of answering with certainty, because beneath all the gossip, all the intrigue, and all the speculation remained a deeper reality. Royal history has always been defined by an uncomfortable conflict between personal feelings and institutional survival. Families seek reconciliation. Institutions seek stability. Sometimes those goals align, sometimes they collide head-on. According to those following the story closely, this controversy became one of the clearest clearest examples of that collision. On one side stood the possibility of reopening old conversations. On the other stood fears about precedent, trust, and the future direction of the monarchy. Charles allegedly made his choice, and whether people agreed with it or not, the message appeared unmistakable. The future crown came first. William came first. The institution came first. As palace lights continued glowing behind ancient walls and speculation continued racing across headlines, one thing became increasingly clear. Meghan's last-ditch proposal may have failed, but its failure allegedly triggered something much bigger than anyone expected. It revealed where power was moving, who the monarchy was preparing for, and which figures would shape the next chapter of royal history. And if the whispers circulating through palace corridors are even partially true, the real shock was never the rejection itself. The real shock was that Charles used the moment to show the entire royal family exactly where his confidence now rests. Not in revisiting old battles, but in preparing William for the future that is rapidly approaching. And that realization may continue sending ripples through royal circles long after the headlines fade away.